Hey folks, welcome back to Mark Kelly Farm and welcome to video number 3 in our whole hog butchering series that we're doing. So today we're going to work on our bacon and our hams and our ham hocks, and we're probably going to grind our sausage. So stick around and we'll get that stuff done. So before we get started, I wanted to give a big shout out and a big thank you to a former co-worker of mine before I retired named Joe Camara. He watches our channel. He's of Portuguese descent just like I am, so we had plenty to talk about at work. But he sent me some seeds that he says are for collard greens that originally came from the old country that he got from his mother. The old country meaning the Azores, because that's where our families were from. My family was from St. George Island. They still have descendants there. One of these days, I really want to go visit. I do not remember what island Joe's family was from. But he said these greens will do very well here in Nebraska. They're cold tolerant and they grow very well. So thank you, Joe. We appreciate that. And we're definitely going to get those in the garden this year. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our brine going for our hams and our ham hocks. So we got a couple food grade buckets. I got this one at Ace Hardware. The buckets that you get at like Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware generally are food grade buckets. If you look at the little triangle here, there'll be a number 2 in it. And that's a food grade bucket. They come with lids. So starting out with this bucket, we're going to put 2 1/4 cups of kosher salt. We're going to do 2 cups of brown sugar, 2 1/2 tablespoons of a pink curing salt, and that's not like pink Himalayan salt. It's actually curing salt that you buy, and we'll show you. 1 tablespoon of pickling spice and 1/4 cup of molasses. And then after we do that, we need to get 2 quarts of water to a boil. We've got all our ingredients in here. This is the pink curing salt I was telling you about. It's also called Prague powder number 1. You can get this online on Amazon, anywhere you can buy this kind of stuff. This is not interchangeable with Morton's Tender Quick. They're different ratios. There's recipes for Morton Tender Quick, but for this recipe, it's the pink curing salt. And if you've never dealt with molasses, this is sold over near your pancake syrup in your store. It's really thick, really concentrated, and adds a nice level of sweetness. So now we're going to get 2 quarts of boiling water and pour in this bucket to dissolve this mixture. Our mixture has dissolved, and you can tell if you're stirring the bottom of the bucket, you won't feel any more granules scraping on the bottom. So once it's dissolved, we're going to add cold water. We're going to do 4 quarts of cold water, so a total of 6 quarts of water. So I'm going to measure up 4 quarts and dump them in here. Now, a little trick you can use to cool your brine down even faster is throw some ice cubes in before you measure your 4 quarts. So they're part of the 4 quarts of water. And then when these ice cubes melt, it's plenty cool to throw your hams or your hocks in here. You don't want to put your meat into a warm brine. You want it room temperature or colder. All right, we're going to go down and get the meat and start putting it in our bucket. All right, we've got our boneless ham roast up out of the fridge. So get yourself out a scale and you want to weigh these. And the reason you want to weigh them is because the heavier they are, the bigger they are, the longer they need to sit in the brine. The amount of brine in the bucket does not matter because it's all the same ratio. You just got to make sure that all of the meat is covered, but the weight matters. So you want your ham roast to stay in there 1 day for every 2 pounds worth of roast. We're between 7 and 5 pounds, so we're going to go with the 7. And then on just to add a measure of safety, we're just going to call them all 8 pounds. So at 8 pounds, these roasts need to be in the brine for 4 days. Now, you can't brine them too long because they're only going to take in so much brine. And again, the ratio in the bucket of the brine is not going to change. The ratio to salt to water and all that. So what I normally do is I just go a straight 7 days. I don't calculate any further than that. That gives us a good safety margin and we'll be good with that. So we'll go 7 days in the brine. Every couple days we'll kind of rearrange things in the bucket. So if there's a spot up against the side of the bucket that's not getting brine, it'll be rotated around and it'll get it. So after 7 days, we'll come back with another video and we'll show you what to do when they come out of the brine. So I'm going to put all these in the buckets and we'll get this thing stored in the fridge. Got all 4 hams in this bucket, and that's probably about 27 pounds of ham in this one bucket. Now we need to make sure the meat stays below the layer of liquid, and this is still one recipe of brine in here, so you can see one recipe of brine will do just about a full bucket. So we're going to find a plate that fits the inside of this bucket. We'll put a plate in here, and then we'll get a Ziploc bag with some water in it for some weight to hold that plate down. A lot of people will use brine in your Ziploc bag in case it breaks. It doesn't water down your brine, which is a good idea. And we actually have extra brine here in this bucket that we can do that with. So we'll get that done. Got our hocks in, and I believe because the box are so bone dense, because they've got the big bone in them, they're not going to float. So we're going to forego putting a plate in here. As we check these throughout the week, if for some reason they start floating, we'll go ahead and add a plate in there. Another thing I wanted to show you on these buckets is they have an O-ring in the lid to where they seal and they don't spill all over the place. And these lids will come with a plastic ring on here that connects all of these. So you can seal this bucket and it won't open. To open the bucket, you have to break the little tab and rip that plastic ring off so you can bend these out to get your bucket open. So as you open your bucket, you just wrap your fingers around and then pop it loose all the way around. It'll come loose. But if that ring is still on there, you'll have to peel that off. But this little hammer right down on there and this bucket won't even leak. So we'll get this down in the fridge and then we'll move on to our bacon. If you're as forgetful as I am, throw you a Post-it note on top. I've got a week out on here, so 12/19. These will need to be ready to be smoking. One says hocks, one says hams. That way I know what's in each container. Okay, hams and hocks are in the fridge. I wanted to touch base real quick on the amount of pink salt in that recipe. If you've used pink salt before, you will probably figure out that is a lot of pink salt for those pounds of meat. However, the pink salt is not going to be mixed into the meat like you would with a sausage or something like that. Most of that pink salt is going to stay in the brine. Only what soaks into the meat will actually be in the meat. And that's why it seems like more than what it should be. There's always going to be more in a brine than there is in like a sausage recipe or something like that. We have retrieved half of our bacon from the fridge. Left the other half down there to be cold. We have 2 half sides of pork belly. So we got a mixing bowl out, and for each bag, we're going to place in this mixing bowl 3 tablespoons of kosher salt, 1/3 cup of white sugar, 2 tablespoons of pepper, 2 teaspoons of paprika, and I'm going to use my smoked paprika, and then 1 teaspoon of the pink curing salt. And we're going to combine all that together, and then we're going to throw one of these bacon slabs out on this cookie sheet. We'll season it, flip it over, season it. We're doing it on the cookie sheet so we don't waste any seasoning. We want basically every bit that we mix up to end up on this side of bacon or in this bag. So this will help us coat the bacon really well by keeping it contained on the cookie sheet. Got everything in here for our dry rub mixture. And I use a little whiskey thing to stir it all up. Now, when you're thinking about a cure, a lot of people, when they think about bacon, love a sweet, smoky bacon. But I'm going to warn you against going too sweet on your bacon. I've done that before where you put molasses or maple syrup or whatever into your mixture. If your bacon is too sweet, got too big of sugar content, when you cook your bacon, it's going to caramelize very quickly in the skillet, and it's very hard to keep it from burning when you're cooking. So be mindful of that. I've made that mistake, and that's why I'm passing it on to you. This recipe here is not too sugar forward, but it gives you just that little bit of sweetness that you need in the bacon. All right, we're sufficiently combined. I'm going to get one of these out, and we'll start the seasoning process. Got our seasoning on. We pour about half of our mixture on here, and then you want to rub this around because you don't want any of it to be loose and falling off when you flip this thing over. Rub it around in all the moist areas of the meat. Try to get all of that to stick and coat evenly all the way across the belly here. We'll continue to do this because I want to get two hands in here. And then we'll flip it, and then same thing on the other side. Try to get some when you pick the bacon up. If there's any seasoning down in the pan, dip or blot your edges of the meat down into that seasoning. So we'll get this baby done and back in the bag. Got both sides of our bacon slab rubbed down. You can see we've got as much out of this pan as we could of the seasoning. And to get this back in the bag, kind of roll it and shove it into the bag. That way you don't get a bunch of seasoning on your sealing surface on the Ziploc bag. Because if you get a bunch of pepper and stuff in that zipper, it's not going to close tight. So we're going to do our other slab now, just like we did that one. Got both of our slabs done. So we're going to put this down in the fridge, and then every day I'm going to turn these over. And there's going to be 2 pans of these in the fridge with 2 slabs. So as this sits in the fridge, that salt and sugar is going to draw moisture out of that bacon, and that bacon's going to firm up. And then that liquid in the bag is going to create its own brine in the bag. So as you're turning these things over, it puts weight on one or more weight on one or the other. So every day I'll go down there and just flop these. So I'm going to take these down into the fridge and bring the other 2 up. And I probably won't show you the other 2 since we just did these. Got our 2 buckets down here in the fridge. We got our 4 slabs of bacon. This is our extra fridge down in the basement that we use for the garden and everything when the garden is going. So we don't pack this full of stuff. And because we don't, we can fit things like 5-gallon buckets in here. And we'll put extra sodas and stuff in here if we got people coming over. But it's good to have an extra fridge like this, and I highly recommend doing that if you're doing any kind of gardening or meat processing. It's nice to have all this space. These 2 drawers down here are completely empty. We can put other stuff in those. So good stuff. A couple things I wanted to mention just in case I hadn't before. Those bags that have the bacon in them are 2-gallon Ziploc bags. So pretty much a half of a belly will fit in each bag. And then the recipe does about 3 to 4 pounds of bacon. And each one of those is 3 to 4 pounds. That works out perfectly with the ratio. And then as you're going processing your meat, especially if you're grinding or doing something like that, as you go through your meat, feel around in the meat, make sure there's no bones left in it. Like these bacon, there was 2 of these bacon sides that had little pieces of that gristle from the spare rib when I pulled it off. You might have seen that in the video. But I just carved those out. But those are no longer in there, so they're not going to cause a problem later. So inspect your meat as you go. If you see a little bad spot, throw it out. Don't keep it in there. All right, folks, we have our hams brining. We have our hocks brining. We have our bacon curing. Next up is our sausage. We ended up with 30 pounds of sausage grind that we're going to grind. So we're going to get things together, go out in the barn where the meat processing area is, where the big grinder is, and we're going to run all this through the grinder and we'll mix up some sausage. Now in the end of this video, we're going to give you a screenshot of all these recipes, and if you haven't written them down, we'll give you the ham cure, the bacon cure, and also some bonus sausage recipes. We have like a whole sheet of those. We're also going to be doing something different with this video process that we're doing here with the hog. Not only can you see these on our channel if you're paying attention and following along our channel, one of our subscribers, I'm going to make a new playlist in the playlist with just processing this hog from start to finish. So every video in this series will be in that playlist. So you can go into the playlist, start watching it, and it'll just continue on to the next video and so on and so on. So it's a one-stop shop for the whole hog process. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to string all these videos together to where the whole process is in one video. It may turn into a 2-hour video, but some people like to binge watch the whole process like that and don't like to go jumping around trying to find the different videos. So we're going to call that video Bullet to Bacon, which will be pretty good play on words, I think. But it'll be your one-stop shop video for the whole process. I found when I look up things on YouTube, nobody shows the whole process. They'll show you killing the pig, they'll show you skinning the pig, they'll show you doing this, doing that. But you got to go jumping around to a bunch of different areas and sometimes to even different channels to find the whole process. So we're going to do the whole thing for you, and we're going to do it like 3 different ways. So you'll be able to see this. All right, folks, we're out here with our big meat grinder. We have our 30 pounds of trim meat that we're going to grind up. We're using our larger plate, which is what you call this, that goes in the end of the grinder. And once we grind all this meat up into this tub, we'll take it inside the house and we'll portion it into the different recipes that we want to do. We'll season it up, and then we'll come back out and run it through our smaller plate. So let's get going. Okay, that's 30 pounds of meat that quick. So I'm going to show you a little trick. You're always going to have a little bit of meat stuck right down in here. So a neat trick is bring out some ice cubes and drop some ice cubes one at a time down in there. Because this stuff needs to be cold anyway. We'll be mixing ice water with it later. And then once you see just ice coming out, no more meat, cleaned out. Look at that gorgeous ground pork. So we have 30 pounds, so I've decided I'm going to do 5 pounds of Italian, I'm going to do 10 pounds of chorizo, And then I'm going to do 15 pounds of breakfast sausage because that's what we use the most of. So I got my scale underneath my bowl. I'm going to portion out 5 pounds right now for our Italian sausage. For our 5 pounds of Italian sausage, and sorry, Kelly, Italian, I've been saying Italian. She's going to correct me. So we got 2.5 tablespoons of salt. We have 1.5 teaspoons, which is a half a tablespoon of fennel, which makes it uniquely Italian sausage. 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1.5 teaspoon or half a tablespoon of sugar, and we're spicing it up with a little bit of cayenne pepper because Kelly doesn't eat this. You can go from anywhere from a teaspoon to 1.5 tablespoons if you really like it warm. So into that dry mixture, we're going to add 1 cup of really cold water, and we're going to stir that up. And that way the spices mix more thoroughly through the meat. And you want to add a little water to your sausage anyway, especially if you're stuffing it, but we're not going to stuff it. So now we're going to pour that through this meat and we're going to mix it up with our hands. It doesn't have to be perfect because remember we're going to run this through the grinder again, and that's really going to mix those spices a lot better. Got our 10 pounds of ground pork. So for our 10 pounds of chorizo, you're going to see this flavor profile is a lot more aggressive. We're going with 5 tablespoons of salt, 5 tablespoons of paprika. We're using our smoked paprika. 3 tablespoons of cayenne pepper. I only had 2, so I used a tablespoon of crushed red pepper, which is fine. And then you got 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 tablespoon of ground oregano, 2 teaspoons of black pepper, 3 tablespoons of chili powder, and instead of the water, we're using 2 cups of red wine vinegar. And that's our chorizo recipe. So we're going to stir that up well. We're going to mix that through this 10 pounds of meat by hand. 15 pounds we have left. We're doing all in the breakfast sausage. So in our bowl for our breakfast sausage, we have 5 tablespoons of salt, 3 tablespoons of black pepper, 4 tablespoons of sage, which is ground, 4 tablespoons of thyme, which is my favorite herb, 1 tablespoon of the rosemary, 6 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon nutmeg, 1 tablespoon cayenne, 1 tablespoon of crushed red pepper. But like I said, I'm out of cayenne, so I just did 2 tablespoons of crushed red pepper, and that will be fine. Now to this, because we have 15 pounds, we're doing 3 cups of ice cold water. Got her mixed up. It smells fantastic. Now a quick tip on this is when you're dumping your spices into your meat, if there's some that stay in the bowl, grab a handful of meat and use that to wipe the bowl out. All right, completely mixed. We're going to put this out in our garage because this time of year our garage is a walk-in cooler. We're going to take this out to the barn and grind it. We're not going to take you back with us because we've already probably seen plenty of grinding. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our lightest flavor profile first in the grinder, which would be our Italian. We'll just take that whole bag out there, dump it into the tray, grind it, put it right back in the bag. And then we'll take our breakfast sausage out. We'll grind it right into this tub and then bring it back into the garage. And then we'll take our chorizo out and grind it last. And then we'll be done. There's our final grind, folks. It's on our chorizo. Mixed up really well. Got a nice mixture of the fat content. Sometimes if you leave this sausage too coarse, it won't form a patty. This is going to patty up real nicely right here. So let me show you the type of packages that we put it in, and we'll wrap this thing up. I'm going to wait for Kelly to get home from work, and then she can help me bag all the sausage up. She holds the bags open for me, and then I portion all the meat out. Back when we lived in California, we used to have sausage making parties on New Year's Day. Actually, New Year's Eve. Pork butt was always on sale at that time, so we'd all go out and buy a bunch in bulk. One of my buddies had a big meat grinder like the one I use out in the barn, and it would make short work of that sausage, and I would mix up all the spices for everybody, and we'd package it all up. It was a fun time. Now this is what the packages look like when we're done. We use quart size vacuum seal bags. We'll put a pound of meat in there. This was breakfast sausage from last year. I got about 8 pounds of it left. But once we vacuum seal it, we have a little ball of meat in there, and then we flatten it all out and fill the whole bag so they stack back in there real nicely. And then when you go to cook this, you just cut the bag off. You could throw this right in the skillet just as is. Doesn't have to defrost or anything. And put it on about medium heat, and about the time it's ready to flip over, it's defrosted. And then you just cut it up into squares or do whatever you want to do with it. Alright my friends, we're going to end this video here with this, finishing up this portion of our hog harvest this year. We've done our hams, we've done our bacon, we've done our ham hocks, and we've done our sausage. And as you can see, doesn't take that long, and there's really nothing to it. So I'm going to screenshot you those recipes real quick. Alright, pause and screenshot all that if you need to. The sausage recipe page has the breakdown for all different weights for 1 pound, 5 pound, 10 pound, 20 pound. So it's pretty convenient, and there's 4 different recipes on there that you can try. So, hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you try making some pork products of your own. If you're not doing it, I don't know why. It's super easy and super good. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll come back when it's smoking time on them hams and hocks and bacon. And that'll be our final installment of our Pork Harvest 2022. Love you guys.